Welcome to UO Today. I am Leah Middlebrook. I am the director of the Oregon Humanities Center, and my guest today is Christopher Long, Provost and Senior Vice President of the University of Oregon. Prior to his arrival at the UO in June of 2024, Long was Dean of both the College of Arts and Letters and the Honors College at Michigan State University, where he was a Research Foundation Professor of Philosophy. And before that, he was Associate Dean for Graduate and Undergraduate Education and Professor of Philosophy and Classics in the College of Liberal Arts at Penn State University. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
What attracted you to this provost job here at the University of Oregon? What brings you here to us?
My career has really been focused on how we can best align the values that we say we care most deeply about as institutions of higher education with the lived experience of our faculty, our students, and our staff. And so I have been looking for opportunities to advance that sort of career mission, that purpose in my life, and something that I've come to over the course of my academic career and also during my administrative work. I think there was a point when I made the transition from faculty to administration where I was really considering, okay, could this be a calling like being a professor was a calling for me? And I realized that it can be a calling if I could put my values into practice in the work that I was doing. I'm a philosophy professor by training, and I got into that because I really wanted to ask the big questions about the meaning of life and help our students and help myself really come to terms with what it means to be a human being with a finite life and aware of one's finitude. And I saw that education was a critical part of that and had transformative power. And so when I moved into administrative life more generally, I thought, okay, well, if I can bring my thoughts and my talent and my approach to bear on the question of how we can empower more students, more faculty, more people involved in higher education to think more intentionally about their purpose, then I could maybe make a difference in how higher education unfolds. So that's sort of the big picture. But what that has meant, though, is that I've been less concerned about what positions I occupy than I have been about where the leverages for transformation are located. And being a dean is a great job. Being a department head, being a professor, they're all great roles. But I realized that a lot of the work that I wanted to advance had to do with leading the academic life of the university and trying to ensure that the ways that decisions were made were intentionally aligned with the values we say we hold most deeply. And you know, as a humanist looking for a provost role that would have the capacity to actually make that kind of institutional transformation that would also allow for maybe the creation of a model that would be more broadly applicable across higher education as an endeavor. I saw that this role here at the University of Oregon was open, and I knew enough about the philosophy department here at the University of Oregon to know that there was a kindred spirit, a set of kindred spirits with the department, their commitment to bringing philosophy into the world in a meaningful way, their approach to the history of philosophy. And so then I also knew that Carl Schultz had just been named the president of the university, and I had a relationship with him. And as I came to campus, I spoke very directly about just what I said about my values enacted approach to leadership and how important relationships are to me. And the resonance that had in all the meetings that I had was just really palpable for me. And so, you know, the University of Oregon is a world-class public research university. It's a member of the AAU. It's now a member of the Big Ten Academic Alliance, all of which were important to me, not because of the prestige they bring, but because I was looking for a place where my leadership style could model, hopefully, a different kind of leadership across higher education. And to do that, you have to have an institution that has enough gravitas from the prestige economy, even as you want to push that prestige economy into a different perspective. So I can't tell you how glad I am to be here. Everyone I've talked to has been so welcoming of me, my family, our cat, and our dog. And we'll get back to that. And my two daughters are both in college, so we kind of moved into an empty nest. And so it's been really wonderful to get to know the university and to get to know Eugene and this beautiful part of the world.
Well, that is just great. And yes, the enthusiasm is notable around campus. What you sort of touched on a lot in your first response, and I was wondering sort of specifically since you arrived in June, what has your initial focus been?
So one of the things that I realized when I arrived here was that there's certain things are expected of the provost and certain ways of relating are expected of the provost. And the ways in which people expect the provost to be or expect to be engaged with the provost is often very transactional. And I have been really trying hard to push back against that kind of transactional approach. My leadership style is relationship-based and values enacted, as I've been saying to people as I've gone around and talked to them. But to be relationship-based means often slowing down and listening and resetting the tone of a meeting. A lot of times meetings are established because somebody needs something, and of course there are transactions that do have to happen. But trying to take a step back to identify the values we care about and then to think intentionally about how we're putting those values into practice in our relationships with each other is really at the heart of the work that I've been trying to do. And since I've arrived on campus, it really has been about trying to find the opportunities to deepen my connections with individuals, with groups, to create the space where we could really talk about, the deeper issues, what's at the root of the various issues that we're facing. And so that has been both enormously rewarding, but it's also challenging because institutions are often, designed to increase the pace. I mean, just probably look at your inbox, your email inbox, or, your Teams messages. I mean, it's just a constant churn. And so finding ways to push back against that so that we can actually find out what is animating our work together and what is bringing us to the work that we're doing with our students and with our staff and with one another. That has been really rewarding, but also has required a lot of attention. And it has really required pushing back about, okay, well, why is this meeting happening? Oh, we've always done it this way. Okay, well, maybe that's a good thing, but maybe we should think about structuring it differently or creating an opportunity for more meaningful engagement. And I can't tell you how much people seem to be yearning for that and how rewarding it is to me as a person to be able to have those connections.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific. Thank you. I'm interested, and I think a lot of us will be interested, about your involvement with the Big Ten Academic Alliance while at Michigan State. I'm going to tell you that I was chatting with colleagues about the fact that I was going to be speaking with you today, and a number of us were reflecting on the fact that we tend to think of the Big Ten as an athletic designation, right? And many of us are sort of unfamiliar with thinking of it as an academic designation. So I'm just curious if you could talk more about the Big Ten Academic Alliance and then how that might benefit the UO community.
Yeah, well, I've been joking, how when Oregon came into the Big Ten athletics conference, they sent a gigantic duck down the river in Indianapolis.
That's
And
right.
I've been joking that I wish I could send a big duck down the Willamette River, really celebrating the Academic Alliance, because to me, as the provost of the university, the Academic Alliance is the best part, the most important part of joining the Big Ten. I definitely have been enjoying the athletic side of it. I mean, having a #1 team in football is fun, and all of that is really good. And I think that does impact the academic life of the university, particularly as we can get the name of the University of Oregon out more broadly. But personally, having been at Penn State and then at Michigan State, I have really grown up in the Big Ten Academic Alliance, and I mean that actually pretty literally, just in terms of my own leadership development. One of I mentioned earlier that there was a point when I was making the transition to becoming an associate dean for undergraduate education in the College of the Liberal Arts at Penn State, and I was sort of grappling with, okay, what does this mean for me, for my life, for my career, and I wasn't sure whether I could put the kind of meaningful life I wanted to live into practice through an administrative job. And my wife was very wise, saying, well, why don't you try it and see how it goes? You can always go back to the faculty. And of course, that was liberating for me, because I feel like it's the dream job is to be in the classroom with students, getting to introduce them to philosophical ideas, asking them to think about their lives in a new way. And so that, when that happened, I was actually invited to be part of the academic leadership program in the Big Ten Academic Alliance. And that's a cohort-based program. There's 5 faculty and administrative leaders at each university who joined the academic leadership program, the ALP. And we visited 3 universities when you go to those universities, you meet with the leadership, and it's kind of an opportunity to see behind the curtain. People are sharing all of the things you don't read about in the newspaper, all of the things about how the budget works and what they were really thinking when they were making that decision. And I began to see the ways in which the people who were doing that work were really thinking intentionally and with a lot of integrity about doing the things that they thought were right in the given context. And I will say that during that was in 2012 when I was in the academic leadership program. The first visit was at the University of Indiana. And I remember being really invigorated by some of the conversations that we were having. Karen Hansen was the provost at Indiana at the time. She was a philosophy professor, and she then became provost at Minnesota. And I could see the passion that she was bringing to her work and the way in which it was aligned with her academic commitments. And as we were leaving that session and heading back to the airport as a cohort from Penn State, I got word from my dean at the time about the Jerry Sandusky scandal. And we returned to an institution that had been completely transformed by that. And that was actually a very formative moment for me as I saw how that scandal impacted students and staff in different ways, and non-tenure system faculty and tenure system faculty in other ways, and even the broader community. And that really led me to think more deeply about certainly the life of an institution, but also how when you're in administration, you have to respond to people where they are and how they're grappling with the traumatic experience that was happening there. And then when at the end of that session, at the end of that period in the academic leadership program, the group from Penn State was asked to be on a panel to reflect on that experience. And that was just enormously powerful, both to see what a candid, honest reflection meant to the people listening, but also how important it was for me as an emerging leader to think with a group of colleagues who had created a space where we could be vulnerable, where we could talk about how hard something was, how we were grappling with our own emotions and pain, even as we were trying to lead. And that experience gave me the sense that, these leadership programs in the Big Ten Academic Alliance, the heads of departments get together, the deans get together. Then, of course, when I became a dean at Michigan State, I became part of the deans, the Liberal Arts and Sciences Deans Group, and I ultimately co-chaired that group. And what an amazing group of colleagues in that group, and always working to collaborate in an environment where a lot of people think of that competition is the coin of the realm, but actually it's a space where we can actually support each other. And in many cases, there are not a lot of people you can rely on when you're a dean. Well, certainly now as a provost, there's only, it becomes increasingly lonely as you get up in the system.
And listening to you also, I'm reflecting that the fact that Oregon is not sort of in the same region as so many other participants in the Big Ten, which is more like a Big 18, right? That I wonder if that also opens up new possibilities for, cross-regional collaboration and exchange of ideas.
Yes, and one of the things that I have been a real champion for in the Big Ten is collaboration, particularly around less commonly taught languages. And
I'm so glad you brought that up. I wanted to ask about that. Yes, tell us more.
Yeah, so we had, when I first became dean at Michigan State and went to the Big Ten Academic Alliance Deans of Arts and Sciences group, the team from the Big Ten Academic Alliance said, well, Mellon has approached us to think about how we could bring this course share project that we have. So one of the things with the Big Ten Academic Alliance is we share language courses across the whole alliance. And that really is helpful for these languages that are less commonly taught, because you often will have 2 or 3 students at a university who are taking, let's say, Hebrew or Swahili, but that getting critical mass to teach that across higher orders of proficiency is difficult. So we, for a long time, exchanged courses. And this was even before it was easy to do this asynchronously and online. So we were booking classrooms and setting up video cameras and doing this with universities that are, some are on the quarter system, some are on the semester systems, and even if they're on the semester system, they're not meeting at the same time. So it was an enormous undertaking. And Mellon had approached us to say, well, could we take this to a new level of collaboration with some support? And of course, I raised my hand. I would love to help lead that, and that led to what ultimately was, over $3.5 million that we got over the course of 9 years or so. First, to try to coordinate our efforts around the less commonly taught language curriculum, so that we were trying to bring students to higher levels of proficiency in a more coordinated way. So that meant bringing faculty together to work on curriculum and to make that curriculum openly accessible through open educational resources. And then we also pushed them to include indigenous languages, because one of the challenges that we have with federal funding for the languages is because from a federal perspective, indigenous languages aren't considered foreign languages. They're not actually eligible for funding from Title VI and all that. So we were able to fold the work around indigenous languages into that. And now I've really, given what the University of Oregon has in terms of languages generally, but then indigenous languages in particular, I think there's a huge opportunity to take this to the next level and see if we can get, whether it's through Mellon or somewhere else, some real collaboration across the Big Ten more broadly.
Well, as a part-time professor of Romance languages, of course, my heart sings at that. And I know that there is just, yeah, the Indigenous languages and cultures work done on this campus is so exciting. So that's just terrific to hear about.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see that it's really a visionary idea that the Committee on Institutional Cooperation, which is what the Big Ten Academic Alliance was called when it was first established in the 1950s, when the presidents came together, they were talking about sports, but they were thinking, wait a minute, we're also talking about a lot of things that don't have to do with sports around the academic mission, to create a community that recognizes that the future of education is going to require cooperation more than competition, and how do we create that? And from my perspective, that's based on relationships, and relationships that are built over time, and so that's been one of the most rewarding parts of my work with the Big Ten Academic Alliance.
That's terrific. And that also helps me think about another dimension of your profile is that you're such a proponent of open access.
Yes.
Right? Can you talk about how open access fits into your value system?
Well, I always joke, yes, being published is good, but being read is even better.
Yes.
So, and coming out of Penn State and Michigan State with the land-grant mission that they both have, and now being here at a public research university, it's really our responsibility to make sure that the knowledge we generate and the discoveries we make are accessible to a broader public. So that has led me to be a champion of open access in general from a publishing standpoint. But this is also tied to this kind of values enacted approach to leadership and scholarship, recognizing that if we care about certain things like openness, maybe even like equity, particularly when you're talking about some of the material that is being published is behind a paywall, and that means that people who don't have access to institutions that can pay those resources don't have access to that knowledge. So it's an openness question, but it's also an equity question, particularly for scholars across the globe who might not have access to the work. So that became a really important component of my own scholarship just as a philosophy professor, as a scholar. I really always was pushing the publishers to give me access to my own articles so that I could post them on my website, so that I can put them in the institutional repository so that they could be accessed by anybody who discovered them. And that also then now as I look at what it means at the provost level, I'm working with the libraries here at Oregon, and Alicia's been a huge champion of the work of open access. It's our responsibility to make sure that our work is accessible to as many people as possible. So that also was part of what animated the work that I've done with the Public Philosophy Journal, which is kind of a unique, it's a unique way of pursuing publishing.
Tell us more. I don't think I know about the Public Philosophy Journal.
So the Public Philosophy Journal is actually the idea is that we would do philosophy with the public in the very way in which we publish. And so what we ask people who are submitting things to the journal to do is to identify the community that is engaged in the work that you're doing, and then we invite a member of that community to be a community reviewer, and we also identify another reviewer, and it's in an open review environment. So it's not anonymous reviewing, it's open review. We ask people to just think about this person whose work you're reviewing as a friend. And just as with a friend, you would want to give them constructive criticism in a way that they can hear it, and sometimes very robust criticism, but in a way that can be heard and used. We ask people to do that in the Public Philosophy Journal formative review process that we've developed. And the work is really been pretty interesting. We have articles in the journal co-authored and also reviewed by incarcerated individuals around questions of imprisonment in prisons, and we have a whole issue on the band fish, which, you know, is a huge community of people listening to fish.
I saw them as an undergrad.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you know, we didn't have any trouble getting people who wanted to write and review about the banned fish. But that's a great example of how communities can be participating in the development of ideas that are then openly accessible to anyone to read and to learn from.
That is really interesting. We're running close to the end of our time together, but I did want to give you just a little bit of time to talk a little bit about the Humane Metrics Initiative. I think it sounds very woven into some of the things you've been bringing up today.
Yes, you can hear it in pretty much everything that I'm talking about. So yeah, the Humetrics Initiative was founded in 2016, and it was originally designed to try to think more deeply about the indicators that we were using to measure quality or excellence in scholarship. And we were seeing that a lot of the indicators were kind of proxy indicators for excellence when they weren't actually measuring excellence. So even something like, you know, the amount of money you get in a grant isn't necessarily an indicator that that grant is doing something excellent in the world. It's just that, you know, you've received these resources. Citations in the humanities is a great example. I mean, you could be very provocative and be saying some ridiculous things and be cited a lot. That doesn't necessarily mean a lot of citations is, namely, you know, an indicator of high quality work. So we got together to think about not just valuing what we could measure, but measuring what we value and learning to do that. And what that actually led to was structured workshops around values and active leadership, values and active scholarship, and that meant opening space for people to talk about, well, what are the core values that are animating your work, and how are you putting those values into practice in the work that you're doing, whether that's organizing a conference or writing a book or writing a tenure review letter. So if, you know, how do you put those values into concrete practice in your work? And what we found is that when you give people the chance to do that, the conversation shifts, more trust is developed, and you actually are able to make more transformative change because of the trust in that space. And now I'm really happy that we just received 2 grants, one from the Mellon Foundation for $650,000 and another from the Hewlett Foundation for another $650,000. So that's $1.3 million that is being granted now to the University of Oregon, along with my colleagues in the Humetrics Initiative, to establish the Values and Active Leadership Institute, which will be a summer program bringing teams together for 5 days in the summer, or for a set of time prescribed in the summer, to give them a chance to identify the values that they want to put into practice in the transformative work that they're doing. So we're going to be soliciting applications for people, whether they want to change the way the tenure and promotion process is happening, or how curriculum is developed, or other elements of how we cultivate leadership in a broader swath of faculty across the university. So I'm really excited that that's going to be now an ongoing part of the University of Oregon's commitment to values and active leadership.
That is going to be very interesting to watch unfold. So thanks for giving us a preview here today. I'll have to say, we're going to have to bring you on the show again.
Okay,
there's so much to talk about, but I just wanted to thank you once again for joining us. It's been so great to have the opportunity to hear you reflect on your values and your ideas, and what Christopher P. Long is going to be like as a provost here at the University of Oregon. So I have been speaking with Christopher Long, Provost and Senior Vice President of the University of Oregon, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Before closing for today, I just wanted to let our audience know that we have some exciting changes coming at UO today. We will be transitioning into a podcast format, and that means that we'll be introducing some new features and some segments that sort of come molded around our regular, more extended interviews. You'll still be able to find us here on YouTube, where some of you are watching us today. We'll just look a little bit different. And you will also still be able to listen to us on SoundCloud, as you can right now. You will have noticed that during the fall months, as we've been preparing the new show, our interview schedule has been somewhat light. Our next interview will be with UO President Carl Schultz, and that will take place in December. And then starting in January, you'll be hearing a lot more UO Today. Thanks for watching and listening, and we look forward to sharing the new show with you.